This is HOA debrief. The cover-up was louder than the original incident. Laura waved a conflict of interest form in my face and screamed that conflicts were optional, her voice cracking across the driveway like a whip. "You missed the deadline and now you get the consequences," she said, jabbing the paper toward my chest. I stood there in my work gloves, binder under my arm, staring at the woman who controlled pool access in Juniper Terrace Association like she was guarding the gates of heaven. I am a civil engineer who hates sloppy paperwork, and nothing about this added up. The form she was waving was dated 3 days ago. I had never received it. My payment receipt for the quarterly HOA dues showed paid in full 2 weeks before the deadline, confirmed by email and logged in my bank account. But the Juniper Terrace portal now showed me as delinquent with a late fee stacked on top and a lien threat letter already printed. Laura had handed it to me 5 minutes ago when I came home from work, standing at my mailbox like she owned it. Park City, Utah is a town where people expect things to run smoothly, where the ski culture and resort money create a veneer of civility. Juniper Terrace Association sat on the east edge, a cluster of townhomes that looked harmless but operated under a board that treated records like private property. Laura Lee was the pool and amenities chair, a role she had stretched into a full-time enforcement gig. She wore a tiny body camera clipped to her windbreaker collar, the kind you buy online for $20, and she loved to remind people it was always recording. What she did not know yet was that it recorded her too. I took a slow breath and kept my voice level. "Laura, I paid on the 16th. I have the receipt. I can pull it up right now." She crossed her arms, the glove box envelope of certified slips tucked under one elbow. "The portal says unpaid." "If the portal says unpaid, you are unpaid. I do not care what your bank shows. Our system is official." I pulled out my phone and opened my email. The receipt was right there, timestamp clear, transaction ID visible. I turned the screen toward her. Laura glanced at it for half a second and waved it away. "That is your problem, not mine. The portal is the record. If you want to dispute it, you file a formal appeal. Deadline was yesterday." My chest tightened. I work as a civil engineer for a firm that is watching my attendance like a hawk. I am on probation after taking time off last year for a family emergency, and one more late arrival ends my probation and puts my job in jeopardy. I cannot afford to spend my mornings fighting HOA paperwork battles, but I also cannot afford a lien on my home. My insurance company had already sent a renewal notice with a note that any liens or judgments would trigger a premium hike or a policy drop. "Laura," I said slowly, "this does not make sense. The timestamp on my receipt is earlier than the due date. If the portal is wrong, that is a system issue, not a compliance issue." She smiled, thin and sharp. "I am the reason this neighborhood stays civilized. If I let one person slide, everyone slides. You missed the deadline and now you get the consequences." She turned and walked toward her SUV parked at the curb, her sun hat shadowing her face in the flat overcast light. I stood there, phone still in hand as she drove away. The envelope under her arm had looked thick, like she had a stack of certified mail slips ready to go. I wondered how many other people had gotten the same treatment. That night I logged into the Juniper Terrace portal and pulled up my account history. The payment I made on the 16th showed as pending for 2 days, then cleared on the 18th, well before the deadline on the 20th. But now the portal showed the payment as rejected on the 19th, with a note that said insufficient funds. My bank account had never bounced. The transaction had gone through clean. Someone had gone into the system and changed the status after the fact. I screenshot everything, saved the bank confirmation, and opened a new folder on my desktop. I labeled it Evidence. The next morning I called the management company that handled Juniper Terrace, a firm called Summit Property Group. The woman who answered put me on hold for 6 minutes, then transferred me to a compliance officer named Greg. I explained the situation, reading off my transaction ID and the portal timestamps. Greg sighed like he had heard this before. "Let me pull your account," he said. There was a pause, keyboard clicks. "Yeah, I see the payment. It cleared on our end. I do not know why the portal is showing it as rejected. That is weird. Can you fix it?" I asked. "I can flag it for review, but the board has to approve any corrections. That takes about 2 weeks." 2 weeks? Laura already handed me a lien threat letter. She said I missed a deadline yesterday. Greg went quiet for a moment. "Look, between you and me, Laura has been pushing compliance hard this quarter. She has been submitting violation reports almost daily. If she filed a lien notice, it is already in motion unless you can prove the payment cleared before the board meets next week." "When is the board meeting?" I asked. "Thursday, 7 p.m. You can request to speak during homeowner comments, but you need to submit the request in writing by Tuesday noon." I thanked him and hung up. It was Monday morning. I had just over 24 hours to put together a packet and get it submitted. I opened my evidence folder and started building a timeline. That afternoon, I drove to the Juniper Terrace office, a small building tucked behind the pool complex. The records custodian, a woman named Diane, sat behind a desk piled with file boxes. I asked to see the minutes from the last board meeting and any correspondence related to my account. Diane looked at me like I had asked for state secrets. "Those files are confidential," she said, not looking up from her computer. "I am a homeowner," I said. "I am allowed to request records under the bylaws. You can request them, but I cannot let you photograph anything. You can review them here, but no cameras, no phones." I sat down and Diane pulled a box labeled Board Minutes from the shelf. She dropped it on the table with a thud. I started flipping through. The most recent meeting minutes were dated 3 weeks ago. There was a line item about delinquent accounts, but no names listed, just a note that compliance actions were underway. I kept digging. 2 meetings back, there was a line about a payment dispute that had been resolved in favor of the association. No details, no homeowner name, just resolved. I asked Diane if there were any older disputes like mine. She shook her head. If it is not in the minutes, it did not happen. I thanked her and left. But as I walked to my car, I saw my neighbor from 2 doors down, a man named Eric, standing by the mailbox cluster. Eric was older, retired, the kind of guy who kept his lawn perfect and never caused trouble. He waved me over. "You dealing with Laura too?" he asked quietly. "Yeah," I said. "Payment dispute. She is saying I missed a deadline, but I have proof I paid on time." Eric nodded slowly. "This happened to me last year. Same thing. My payment cleared, then the portal said it did not. They hit me with a late fee and threatened a lien. I ended up paying it just to make it go away." "Did you ever figure out what happened?" I asked. "No," Eric said. "I asked for the records and they told me the same thing Diane probably told you. Confidential. I did not have the energy to fight it. But I will tell you this. Another guy, 2 streets over, same thing happened to him about 6 months before me. He moved out right after. Never said why." I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. "How much did you end up paying?" $300, Eric said. "Late fee, lien processing fee, and an admin fee for the dispute. It was easier than hiring a lawyer." I thanked Eric and went home. That night, I pulled up the Juniper Terrace Association website and started searching for any mention of past board disputes. There was nothing public. But I found an old cached version of the site from 2 years ago that listed board meeting minutes as downloadable PDFs. I clicked through. Most of the links were dead, but one file still loaded. It was from 18 months ago, and buried in the line items was a note about a payment reconciliation issue that had been referred to an external auditor. The next meeting minutes made no mention of the audit or its results. I saved the PDF and added it to my folder. I was starting to see a pattern. Tuesday morning, I drafted my request to speak at the board meeting. I kept it short and factual. I attached my bank receipt, the portal screenshots, and a timeline showing the payment cleared before the deadline. I emailed it to the board secretary and copied Greg at Summit Property Group. By noon, I had not heard back. I called Greg. He answered on the first ring. "Did you get my email?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. I forwarded it to the board. Laura already replied. She said your request does not meet the format requirements and you need to resubmit using the official form. "What official form?" I asked. She attached it to her reply. "It is a Word doc. You have to fill it out and submit it as a PDF with your signature notarized." "Notarized?" I said, my voice rising. "The meeting is Thursday. I do not have time to get something notarized." "I know," Greg said quietly. "I am sorry. I do not make the rules." I hung up and opened Laura's email. The form she attached was 3 pages long, with fields for my full legal name, parcel number, account number, a detailed description of the issue, and a notarized statement that I had exhausted all informal resolution attempts. At the bottom was a note that submissions received after Tuesday at 5 p.m. would not be considered. It was already 12,030. I had 4.5 hours. I filled out the form at my desk, printed it, and drove to a UPS store that offered notary services. The notary was on lunch break. I waited 20 minutes. She came back, checked my ID, watched me sign, stamped the page. I scanned it at the self-service kiosk and emailed it to the board secretary at 4:47 p.m. Wednesday morning, I got a reply from Laura. "Your submission was received after the deadline due to processing delays. You will need to wait until next month's meeting to present your case. In the meantime, the lien process will proceed as scheduled." I read the email 3 times. The timestamp on my sent email was 4:47 p.m. The deadline was 5 p.m. There was no processing delay. She was lying. I forwarded the email chain to Greg and asked him to confirm the timestamp. He replied within 10 minutes. "Your email arrived at 4:47 p.m. I see it in the server log. I will flag this to the board president." Thursday afternoon, I left work early, telling my boss I had a medical appointment. I could not afford another late mark, and I needed to be at that meeting even if Laura was trying to block me. I drove to the Juniper Terrace clubhouse where the board meetings were held. The parking lot was nearly empty. I went inside and found a seat in the back row. Laura arrived 10 minutes later, carrying a leather portfolio and her glove box envelope of certified slips. She saw me and her expression hardened. She walked to the front table and set her things down, her body camera clipped to her windbreaker as always. The board president, a man named Tom, called the meeting to order at 7:02 p.m. He ran through the standard agenda items, approvals, financials, committee reports. When he got to homeowner comments, he looked up and scanned the room. "Anyone here to speak?" Tom asked. I raised my hand. Tom looked at Laura. Laura leaned over and whispered something to him. Tom nodded and said, "We do not have any pre-approved speakers on the list tonight. If you want to address the board, you need to submit a request in advance." "I did," I said, standing up. "I submitted it Tuesday at 4:47 p.m. I have the email timestamp." Laura cut in, her voice sharp. "The deadline was 5 p.m., but your submission was not processed in time. You will need to wait until next month." I pulled out my phone and held it up. I have the email here. Sent at 4:47. 13 minutes before the deadline. "Would you like me to forward it to you again?" Tom looked uncomfortable. "Laura, is there a record of this?" Laura opened her portfolio and pulled out a printout. According to our system, the request was received at 5:03 p.m. That is after the cutoff. "That is not possible," I said. "The email server log will show 4,047. If your system shows something different, your system is wrong." Tom cleared his throat. We will table this for now and review the timestamps offline. Next item on the agenda is, I did not sit down. I kept my voice calm but firm. Tom, I am here because Laura handed me a lien threat letter based on a payment she claims I missed. I have proof that I paid before the deadline. I have a bank receipt, a transaction ID, and portal screenshots showing the payment was changed after it cleared. This is not a compliance issue. This is a records issue. Tom looked at Laura. Laura, can you speak to this? Laura stood up and walked to the center of the room, turning to face me like we were in a courtroom. I am the reason this neighborhood stays civilized. If I let one person slide, everyone slides. You had multiple opportunities to resolve this before tonight. You chose not to. I had a payment receipt from 2 weeks before the deadline, I said. The portal changed the status after I paid. That is not my failure. That is a system failure. Laura smiled, that same thin, sharp smile. The portal is the official record. If you want to dispute it, you need to follow the process. You did not follow the process. I stared at her, and something clicked. She had said this before. Multiple opportunities. Follow the process. These were script lines, rehearsed and repeated. I thought about Eric, about the guy who moved out, about the missing audit from 18 months ago. This was not the first time she had done this. I pulled the old board minutes PDF from my phone and held it up. Tom, I found minutes from 18 months ago that mention a payment reconciliation issue and an external audit. Where are the results of that audit? Tom blinked. I do not recall an audit. It is in your own minutes, I said. Line item from the September meeting 2 years ago. What happened to it? Laura stepped forward, her voice rising. That is not relevant to your case. You are wasting the board's time. It is relevant if this is a pattern, I said. If the portal has been changing payment statuses for multiple homeowners, that is fraud. That is embezzlement. And if the board knew about it and buried an audit, that is liability. The room went silent. Tom looked at Laura. Laura's face flushed red. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, a woman in the front row raised her hand. Her name was Susan, a former board member who had resigned a year ago. I had seen her at neighborhood events but never spoken to her. Tom, Susan said, I resigned from the board because of this exact issue. I raised concerns about the payment portal and Laura's enforcement practices. I was told to drop it or leave. I left. Laura turned on Susan. That is a lie. You resigned because you could not handle the workload. Susan stood up. I have emails, Laura. I kept them. I can forward them to Tom right now if you want. Tom held up his hand. Everyone calm down. This meeting is getting off track. We will revisit this next month with a full review. No, I said. We are not tabling this. I have a lien threat letter dated today. If the board moves forward with that lien, I will file a formal complaint with the state HOA ombudsman and request a full audit. I will also file a complaint with Summit Property Group for allowing fraudulent records to be submitted. And I will request copies of every payment dispute from the last 3 years under the open records provision of the bylaws. Tom looked at Laura. Laura looked at me. Her hand moved to the body camera on her collar, like she was checking it was still recording. I smiled at her. Do not worry, I said. I am recording too. The meeting ended 10 minutes later with no resolution. Tom said he would schedule an emergency session to review my case and the audit history. Laura walked out without looking at anyone. I went home and spent the next 2 hours drafting a formal records request. I asked for every payment dispute case from the last 3 years, every board email related to compliance actions, and the full results of the audit mentioned in the September minutes. I sent it to Tom and copied Greg. Friday morning, I got a reply from Greg. Your request has been forwarded to the board. They have 10 business days to respond under state law. In the meantime, I have been instructed to pause the lien process pending review. I felt a small surge of relief. I had bought time, but I also knew Laura was not going to let this go. That weekend, I started calling neighbors. I knocked on doors and asked if anyone else had dealt with payment disputes. Out of 20 homes I visited, 4 people said yes. 1 had paid the fees to make it go away. 2 had fought it and eventually had their accounts corrected after months of back and forth. 1 had moved out. I asked each of them if they still had records. 3 said no. 1, a man named Carl, said he had kept everything in a folder in his garage. Carl invited me in and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Inside were printouts of his portal account, bank statements, and a notarized letter from a lawyer he had consulted. The timeline was almost identical to mine. Payment cleared, portal changed to rejected, late fees added, lien threat issued. Carl had hired a lawyer and Summit Property Group had backed down, but only after he threatened to sue. "Did you ever find out why it happened?" I asked. Carl shook his head. The lawyer said it was a system glitch. But I did not believe it. The timing was too perfect. It always happened right after the deadline, like someone was going in and flipping the status manually. I asked Carl if I could make copies. He said yes. I took photos of every page and added them to my evidence folder. Monday morning, I got an email from Tom. "The board has reviewed your request and determined that some of the documents you requested are protected by attorney-client privilege. We can provide the payment dispute records, but not the board emails or the audit report." I replied immediately. The audit report is not privileged. It was referenced in public meeting minutes. Under state law, any document referenced in public minutes is a public record. I expect full compliance within 10 business days or I will file a formal complaint. Tom did not reply. Tuesday afternoon, I was leaving work when my phone rang. It was Greg from Summit Property Group. He sounded tense. "I need to give you a heads up," he said. "Laura filed a complaint against you with the board. She is claiming you are harassing her and other board members. She wants a restraining order through the HOA." "A restraining order?" I said, almost laughing. "For what? Asking for records?" "She says you have been confrontational in meetings, that you have been contacting her directly, and that you have been intimidating other homeowners into supporting your case." "I have not contacted Laura once outside of the meeting," I said. "And I have been talking to neighbors because they have dealt with the same thing. That is not harassment. That is investigation." "I know," Greg said, "but I wanted you to know it is on the agenda for Thursday's emergency meeting. You should be prepared to defend yourself." I thanked him and hung up. I was furious, but I also knew this was exactly what I needed. Laura was escalating, which meant she was scared. And when she was scared, she made mistakes. That night, I went through every email, every text, every piece of paper I had related to Juniper Terrace. I built a timeline on a spreadsheet, color-coded by event type. Payment disputes, board meetings, records requests, Laura's emails, the audit mention, the neighbor complaints. I printed it and added it to my binder. Wednesday afternoon, I got a call from Susan, the former board member. She said she had something I needed to see. I met her at a coffee shop near the neighborhood. She slid a USB drive across the table. "This is every email I sent and received during my time on the board," she said, "including the ones where I raised concerns about Laura and the payment portal, and including the audit report." "You kept the audit report?" I asked, my heart pounding. "I made a copy before I resigned," Susan said. "I knew they were going to bury it. The auditor found that the payment portal had been manually adjusted at least 12 times over an 18-month period. All 12 cases were handled by Laura. The auditor recommended that Laura be removed from any role involving financial oversight, and that the board implement a third-party review process for all compliance actions. The board voted to accept the report and then voted to seal it as confidential. "Why did not you go public with this?" I asked. "Because I was exhausted," Susan said. I had been fighting with Laura for months. My husband was sick. I did not have the energy. But now you do. So take it and finish this. I took the USB drive and thanked her. That night I copied every file and added it to my evidence folder. The audit report was devastating. It laid out every instance where a payment had been marked as rejected after clearing, every late fee that had been applied without proper notice, and every lien threat that had been issued without board approval. The auditor had even found that Laura had been receiving a small stipend for compliance work, a payment that was not disclosed in the board's public financials. Thursday evening, I arrived at the clubhouse an hour early. I set up my laptop and printed copies of the audit report, the timeline, and the neighbor statements. I stacked them on the table in front of me. When Laura walked in, she saw the binder and froze. Tom called the meeting to order. He looked uncomfortable, glancing between me and Laura. First item tonight is the complaint filed by Laura Lee regarding harassment and intimidation, Tom said. Laura, would you like to present your case? Laura stood up and walked to the center of the room. She was holding a folder of her own and she opened it with a flourish. Over the past 2 weeks, this homeowner has engaged in a campaign of harassment against me and other board members. He has been contacting neighbors, spreading false information, and attempting to intimidate me into dropping legitimate compliance actions. I am requesting that the board issue a formal cease and desist order and, if necessary, pursue legal action to protect the board's ability to operate. Tom looked at me. Do you want to respond? I stood up and picked up the binder. I opened it to the first page and held it up so the room could see. This is a timeline of every payment dispute in Juniper Terrace over the last 3 years. I have records from 4 homeowners, including myself, who had their payments marked as rejected after they cleared. In every case, the change was made manually in the portal by someone with administrative access. In every case, Laura was the compliance officer who issued the late fees and lien threats. Laura cut in. That is not. I kept talking, louder now. I also have the audit report from 18 months ago that the board voted to seal. The auditor found 12 instances of manual payment adjustments, all handled by Laura. The auditor recommended that Laura be removed from financial oversight. The board ignored that recommendation. Tom went pale. Where did you get that report? It was provided to me by a former board member who kept a copy because she knew you would bury it, I said. And before you claim it is privileged, it was referenced in public meeting minutes, which makes it a public record under state law. Laura stepped forward, her face flushed. You have no right to. I turned to her and smiled. Laura, you said I had multiple opportunities to resolve this. You were right. I had the opportunity to pay a fraudulent late fee like Eric did. I had the opportunity to move out like the guy 2 streets over did. I had the opportunity to shut up and let you keep running this scam. But I did not. Because I am a civil engineer who hates sloppy paperwork, and your paperwork is sloppy as hell. I opened the binder to the next section and pulled out a printout. This is the management contract between Juniper Terrace Association and Summit Property Group. It expired 6 months ago and was never renewed. That means every compliance action Laura has taken in the last 6 months has been done without a valid management agreement. That means every late fee, every lien threat, every notice she has issued is void. Tom stood up. That is not. We have been operating under an extension. Show me the extension, I said. Show me the signed agreement. Tom looked at Laura. Laura opened her mouth and then closed it. She reached for her glove box envelope and pulled out a stack of papers, flipping through them frantically. She could not find it. I pulled out my phone and opened a voice memo app. I pressed play. Laura's voice filled the room, recorded from her body camera during one of our confrontations. I can fine you daily until you give up and you cry. There was a murmur from the other board members. That is out of context, Laura said, her voice cracking. The context is that you said it to me on my driveway while threatening to tow my car, I said, and your body camera recorded it. Just like it recorded you telling me that conflicts of interest are optional. Just like it recorded you telling another homeowner that the rules do not apply to board members. Tom sat down heavily. This meeting is adjourned. We need to consult with our attorney. No, I said. This meeting is not adjourned until the board votes on my case. I am requesting that all late fees and lien threats related to my account be voided, that Laura Lee be removed from any compliance or financial role, and that the board implement the recommendations from the audit report, including third-party oversight of all compliance actions. Tom looked around the room. The other board members were staring at Laura. One of them, a woman named Janet, raised her hand. I moved to approve his requests. Another board member, a man named Rich, said, I second. Tom nodded slowly. All in favor? 4 hands went up. Laura did not raise hers. The motion passes, Tom said quietly. I packed up my binder and left. As I walked to my car, I saw Laura standing by her SUV, her body camera still clipped to her windbreaker. She was staring at her phone, her face pale. The next day I got an email from Tom. The board has voted to implement a full review of all compliance actions from the last 3 years. We are also retaining a new management company to handle all future enforcement. Laura Lee has been removed from her role as pool and amenities chair and is prohibited from contacting homeowners directly outside of official board meetings. I forwarded the email to Greg at Summit Property Group and asked him to confirm that my account was clear. He replied within an hour. Your account shows no outstanding balances. All late fees and lien threats have been voided. I am sorry for the trouble. That weekend I ran into Eric at the mailbox cluster. He smiled and shook my hand. I heard what you did, he said. Thank you. I got a refund check yesterday for the fees I paid last year. Over the next 2 weeks, 3 more neighbors contacted me to say they had received refunds. Carl, the man who had kept all his records, sent me a text. The board just voted to reimburse my legal fees. You did it. I did not do it alone. Susan gave me the audit report. Carl gave me his records. Eric told me this had happened before. Without them, I would have been just another homeowner who paid the fees and moved on. A month later, the board held an election for the pool and amenities chair. Laura did not run. A new compliance process was implemented, requiring third-party review of all late fees and lien threats. Summit Property Group renewed their management contract, and the new terms required quarterly audits of the payment portal. I kept my job. My insurance company renewed my policy with no premium increase. And every time I walk past the mailbox cluster, I think about the guy who moved out, and Eric who paid the fees, and Carl who had to hire a lawyer. They did not have the energy or the resources or the evidence. But I did. And I used it. I hope this story was worth your time.